Okay, folks, a second part of this week's lesson, we're going to be looking at relative clauses. These are very important when you look at them, especially in terms of noun phrases. We're going to look at restrictive and non-restrictive relative clauses. As I've mentioned several times throughout the semester so far, terminology can be a problem for us as teachers and also for our students. Restrictive and non-restrictive relative clauses can have other names. Some people call them defining and non-defining, and there are other terms as well, I think. So let's take a look at these two sentences. My brother, who is a teacher, lives in Boston. And my brother, who is a teacher, lives in Boston. What's the difference there? Now, if you noticed that the first one is sort of making it clear from the way I said it and the way it's written that I have more than one brother, and that the brother who is a teacher is the one I'm interested in, not my brother who is a computer engineer, then that is very different than the second one, where it could be I have one brother, I have many brothers, we don't know. All I know is I've got a brother, he lives in Boston. Oh, and by the way, he's a teacher. So the first one is restrictive, the second is non-restrictive. Restrictive clauses identify the intended reference of the head noun. Richard hit the ball on the car that was going past. And that means that there are many cars, but we're restricting it to the car that was going past. Non-restrictive relative clauses add more descriptive information, and it's often considered optional. He looked into her mailbox. That idea is fine, and it doesn't really change the fact that when we add which she never locked, it's not that she has many different mailboxes. It's just adding extra information. So, in writing, the non-restrictive relative clauses are separated from the head noun by a comma, and typically there's no punctuation used when it's a restrictive post-modifier. And in spoken language, as you heard when I gave you the examples about my brother, intonation and pauses can differentiate whether I mean it as a restrictive or non-restrictive relative clause. Oftentimes, the non-restrictive relative clause information is not as critical to the main point. It's just sort of interesting added information. Now, this function of restrictive or non-restrictive post-modifiers can be performed by other structures rather than just those finite relative clauses. You can have ed clauses, ing clauses, prepositional phrases, and appositive noun phrases. Don't you love all the terminology? So, his is a fury fanned by insensitive press coverage of homosexuality and the AIDS epidemic. That's a restrictive ed clause. The Army's failing to halt northern rebels advancing rapidly. That's the ing clause. So sounds a little stranger to me, but it still works. You can also have prepositional phrases that restrict. Doctors, which doctors? Doctors at the Johns Hopkins Medical School in Baltimore say that. And you can also have an appositive noun phrase, which is just another way of saying your head noun. He cannot pronounce the word expectation. So the word and expectation are the same thing grammatically. Non-restrictive post-modifiers, not quite as common, but they still work. A converted farm building donated by Mr. and Mrs. Tabor has been turned into a study room. Both writing and reading are enormously complex skills involving the coordination of sensory and cognitive processes. The great tall library, with the Book of Kells and of Robert Emmet, charmed him. That's a prepositional phrase. And then the appositive noun phrase, a Soviet deputy defense minister, General Varenikov. And notice the appositives can also be between dashes, they can be in parentheses, as in this example of the eggs. So, when we have post-modification by relative clauses, we'll just call it the use of relative clauses, it has three components. The head noun, that's whatever's being modified by the relative clause. The relativizer is that word, typically something like who or that or which introduces the relative clause. It refers to the same thing or thing, the same person or thing as the head noun. And then there's a gap. There's something missing if you were just to create a separate sentence. And so it's the location of that missing part of the clause. All relative clauses have some missing constituent, they call it. And it oftentimes will it corresponds in meaning to the head noun. Let's look at some examples. The earrings that Mama wore. The head noun are the earrings. The relativizer is that, which refers to the earrings, and then Mama wore. Notice that Mama wore those or Mama wore them. That's the gap, because that is referring to the earrings. Instead of there's having a direct object there, it's just the earrings that Mama wore. And the man who stole the earrings, the man is the head noun, who is the relativizer, but now we're going to have a different gap, and that's the man is going to be the gap. So the man who stole the earrings. We have the direct object, the earrings, but we've gapped out the subject because it's really being replaced by that relativizer. And these are tough concepts for students to understand. So it's important for us to have a good idea of how they work. And then we're going to start thinking, well, then what do you do with that for your particular group of students? I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye.